Effective selling is based on the ability to obtain the right information. And to obtain the right information requires the ability to ask really good questions. Yes, but even more importantly, to explore the details behind that first answer. But are there questions that we should be asking, but we're not? Let's find out. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Good to have you on the podcast. Hey, first timer? Well, if you are a first-time listener, I hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast. I hope you've been invited by someone who referred you to the podcast and recommended that you listen to it. I hope you'll do the same if you find something that makes some sense. Well, listen, if you're just joining us for this episode, you missed the first 2 that come before this one because this is the third in a 3-part series on listening. Interesting thing about listening is we know how important it is to gather useful information that we can use to successfully and effectively convert opportunities. But of course, you'll never get that information if you don't learn how to ask good questions. We're trying to create dialogue. We're not trying to interrogate the prospect. We're not shining a light on them and asking them where they were at a specific time of day like a common criminal. No, we're trying to create a dialogue and understand the scenario and get some insight as to their thoughts and feelings about things and how they're doing and, why are we here and what would we like to accomplish? And none of those questions sound anything like the average salesperson who is asking, as we've talked about, fact-based questions, which are decidedly designed to simply find out how we go about selling you. And the big-time amateur mistake that I talked about in the last episode, the one that really marks you as an amateur is the minute you hear anything that you could potentially use as a launching point to start selling your product, well, that's exactly what you do. Listen, I have some interest in your product because we're trying to create a new project line. Oh my goodness. Well, you've come to the right place. We have that product. In fact, our newest product, the XYZ product, is the finest in the industry. And off we go, right? And we have to tell them everything we know about our product. Now, if that's not your experience with at least some or most of your salespeople, congratulations, because you are way ahead of the game. But as I talked about in the first episode of this 3-part series, the way we train salespeople trains them to talk too much. We don't train people to listen. We train people to share information. That is, my friends, a fact, just based on the way you train your people. So we tell them they have to listen, but we don't teach them how to listen. Now, I think, a reasonable retort to that might be, now, wait a minute. Is that a skill that you can teach? Can you teach someone how to listen, or do they just know how, they pick it up, they understand how to do it, they learn from someone, or can you actually train someone to listen? Well, I'm going to say, yes, you can train people to become better listeners, but it starts with very good, insightful, opinion-based, concept-based, idea-based questions that elicit response, that people want to respond. They want to share their thoughts, feelings, ideas, because they're hoping perhaps you might be different and you could help them get exactly what they need and solve the problems that they have. If, however, you ask a couple of fact-based questions, jump into selling and telling them all about your product, then they realize quickly, well, you're not the exception. Wish you were, but you're not. Listening is an emotional intelligence issue. Are you genuinely empathetic towards people? Do you care what people think? Do you care what they care about? Do you care what their challenges are? Do you care about getting to know more about them? Do you care about understanding their issues and challenges and problems? Or as is most often the case, are you there just to sell them something? And it's the big knock on salespeople. They talk too much and all they care about is selling something so they can get paid. No, I know because I ask, and that's the two most common responses that you get, at least in my experience, anecdotally. So we're trying to teach people to listen when we're not even getting good information. But let's assume we've asked really good questions and we're practicing listening. What we've learned so far is that I'm listening for the opportunity to ask another question that dives deeper behind the details of the first answer that you gave me, because it's those excavated layers that will reveal the really insightful, useful information that I need. But it's not just listening for the opportunity to ask another question, which is a primary objective, but it's to tune into the prospect from an emotional intelligence standpoint and listen to how the answers are coming to you, to observe facial features and body language, and to hear tonality, and to listen for nuance. And I can't tell you how many times I've observed sales calls when someone answered a question by the salesperson and obviously looked pained or agitated or confused or whatever, instead of stopping and saying, my sense is this is a really confusing question, or this is a topic that creates some challenges. Tell me more about that, or what's going on, or what would cause you to feel the way you feel right this second? Oh no, we can't answer. We can't do that. It's way too personal. Or I don't even think about asking those questions. And there are so many questions that we should be asking that we're not asking, that are the gateway to finding out really critical information. So let's kind of go back to the beginning. We all agree that people buy from people they trust. That trust is the foundational cornerstone of that valued, hallowed relationship that we care about. Relationship is not that 3 minutes of rapport building that we do, that we say, hey, I've got a relationship. Nor is a relationship simply because I've called on you 3 or 4 times and just asked how you were doing, and is there anything we can talk to you about? Do you have any quotes we can provide? Do you have any projects we can bid on? No, that doesn't create a relationship. Relationship is built on genuine empathy and getting curious and asking questions and genuinely being interested in the other person. That's how relationships are built in the real world. In fact, if you want to practice, becoming a better listener and building stronger relationships, you can do it anywhere. Start with an insightful question. It can be as simple as, first time we've met, hey, where are you from? And they say they're from a particular place. Wow, I don't know a lot about that place. Tell me more. Did you grow up there? Did you go to school there? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What is it famous for? How did you get into what you're doing now? If you went to college there, and suddenly we've been talking 20 minutes, I haven't said much except to ask some follow-on questions based on information you gave me. And what happens from an emotional intelligence perspective is people begin to relax. Hey, I'm not going to get interrogated. Hey, they're not here to tell me everything they know about their product. Well, that's in the sales scenario. In the genuine real life scenario, we think, hey, this is a pretty nice individual. We're kind of hitting it off. We're kind of forging the beginnings of a potential relationship. Yeah, it's the same thing that happens in sales, except we don't do it. Right? So again, the 3-part series is about listening. The listening part is about being tuned into exactly what that person is saying, but also how they're saying it, and the moods and the feelings that I perceive around that. Now, I know I'm not going all psychoanalysis on you, okay? And I'm not talking about holding hands around the campfire and singing Kumbaya. No, I'm suggesting that when you get genuinely interested in people, you focus on them and their responses, and you pursue those answers with a little more detail. As a very, very young salesperson, I went to work for what turned out to be the best boss I ever had. Well, one of two actually, but at that time, the very best boss I ever had, who had a genuine caring for me as an individual, wanted me to grow and develop. And because we developed a relationship, he could point out my shortcomings and then he would help me find ways to overcome them and to get better at the things that I was doing. I'll never forget, I'd been with the company a couple of months and they send you to a 2-week training school. 2 weeks, I mean, the weekend and everything, and you're there 2 weeks, and it's a sales training for 12 days. And he said, listen, let me tell you what's going to happen on day one. You're going to be in a group of 10 to 15, not sure exactly how many, but it's going to be a pretty good sized group. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to pick somebody seemingly at random, and they're going to give you a role play scenario, and you're going to do a role play right out of the chute. I mean, in the first 10 minutes, they're going to put you on the spot, someone on the spot, and they're going to use it as an illustration to see how well you're prepared and all these kinds of things. I need you to be ready for this. So here's what I want you to do. I'll never forget this. Never. It's the best thing that ever happened to me at that point in time in terms of my profession. He said, they're going to give you the scenario on a piece of paper, a 4x6 card. Read the scenario, and I want you to figure out 2 or 3 questions that you can ask about what they're doing, or the kind of problems they're having, why are they interested, and we practice a lot of this. Here's a scenario. What kind of questions could you ask? So he prepared me for that, but he said something really important. He said, I want you to ask that first question, and I want you to tune out everything. I don't want you to think about selling anything. I want you to genuinely hear what they're telling you in answer to that question. And I want you to say something very simple. I want you to say, well, tell me more about that. And I want you to listen carefully, because this is a role play. And when you do that, they're going to naturally give you more information, and it's going to be critical information. Then I want you to pivot to your second question, and I want you to explore that answer. And we worked on this. We practiced it a few times. And he said, you got to really listen to what you're doing or what they're saying. And then at that point, I want you to then create an approach on how you want to discuss a potential solution with them. But they're going to give you all the answers. Okay, not because there's a script to do that, but the way you ask the questions, they're going to give you really good information that's going to allow you to then pursue an opportunity. Well, as you might have guessed, we get to the first day of this training and introductions. Here's the president of the company. Here's the national sales manager. Here's VP sales and marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Here's all the big people. Welcome aboard to the X number of classes that we've had. And we want to get started right away. We're going to do a role play. And so let's see, Mr. Riggs, why don't you come on up? And they did exactly what I was prepared for. Okay. So how did I do? Well, apparently the feedback was fantastic. They said, you did a really, really good job, very encouraged. You addressed our issues, and, you gave us a roadmap as to exactly the kinds of things we want you to do, which my boss wanted that to happen because it obviously reflected very well on him, but it also, gave me a good first impression in the class. I've never forgotten that. And one of the things that I recognize is that preparation is a significant part of being able to listen well. If you're trying to wing it, you're in your head thinking about what comes next, and you're not listening. And of all the things that we've talked about, this is one of the single most important. Is people will talk about techniques and how to be an active listener, and nodding your head and engaging them with your eyes, and even going so far as to say you need to explore the next question, which is great advice. But what they don't tell you is the ability to be a great listener is predicated on preparation. If you know exactly what you're going to ask, you don't have to think about what to ask. If you know, I'm not here to sell, I'm here to create a dialogue, learn some useful information, and potentially set the next appointment. And if they're willing to set the next appointment, then we're moving ahead. We're making progress. What I'm not here to do is tell you all about my product. I'm not here to sell you anything, because trying to sell you before we've earned the right to sell you, one of the major topics of Miller Hyman's book, Conceptual Selling, which was basically my sales primer back in the day, conceptual selling, earn the right to sell something. How do you do that? Well, you've got to build that relationship, get some useful information, and turn it into something meaningful in terms of a solution presentation. Well, you can't do any of that if you're not prepared effectively. And so part of that preparation is a series of questions that we typically don't ask. It is the questions that we're not asking that is not giving us the opportunity to be really good listeners and to acquire significant information that would be genuinely useful in helping us create the opportunity to convert this deal. Well, what are the questions that we don't ask? Well, typically, let me suggest to you that the reason we don't ask them is that we think it's going to hurt the opportunity to win the deal. I don't know why, but we think it's off base and it's wasting time and we're going down wrong paths and all this. But really great salespeople have that ability to connect. And many times you're thinking, how are they doing that? How did they get such a strong connection so early? Number one, preparation. They know exactly what questions they're going to ask, so they can be prepared to really clue into the nuances of the answers and explore them and create that dialogue. Number two, they know which questions to ask to get the whole dialogue and the conversation started in a meaningful way. And number three, they have a series of questions that the vast majority of salespeople aren't asking. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm not going to tell you they're the right ones or the only ones. I'm just going to suggest to you that there are certain phrases and questions that you can use that you almost assuredly you're not using now. For example, here's one that's, most of us would never think to ask, but when somebody tells us something about a situation, a problem, a challenge, an issue they're having or whatever, to stop and say, well, wow, that sounds like a real problem. How do you feel about that? Kelly, really? You want me to ask people how they feel? Yeah, I do. See, here's the power and the magic of words. If I ask you how you think about something, what do you think about that? And I ask you, how do you feel about that? I will get different answers. And asking you, how do you feel about that? Not in a tear-jerking kind of way, not in an emotional way. But how do you feel about that? Think about someone who has been seemingly offended, they've been wronged or whatever, and you go, man, how do you feel about that? Like, man, I got to tell you, I am seriously upset. I'm very angry about it. And I say, what's creating that anger? Well, I feel completely disrespected, and I feel, they're going to tell you how they feel. Do you understand how valuable that is as information? Because when you can tap into people's feelings and understand how something makes them feel, you have tremendous insight into what motivates them, what drives them, what moves them, what they're interested in, what you can do to help assuage that feeling, avoid that feeling, is going to matter significantly. A second question. Hey, let me ask you this. What do you need to get out of this? I mean, obviously you need this product or you need this project to go well or whatever, but what do you need to get out of it? What's important to you? Nobody's asking these kinds of questions. Are these the exact questions, the right questions? They're designed to get you to think about a different type, a different style, a different approach of questioning that elicits much different information, the kind of information that's really, really helpful. What, if anything, would you change to make this transition more effective? In fact, while we're talking about change, another question is, I could lead up to it with something like, my sense is this is going to require a fairly significant change on your part, either in process or manpower or whatever the case may be. How do you think that change is going to impact your department? How do you think people are going to respond to that change? Is there any scenario where making that change would be too overwhelming and you would avoid it? There are a whole series of questions that we don't ask, that we never get a chance to be a really good listener. Well, coming up next, we're going to look at a couple of more of those questions and the final cue to being a really good listener. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. Risk is the word that people care about. Change is difficult. I'm going to be judged by this decision. I care about what my boss thinks, what the company's going to think. How am I going to justify the decision that I make? And you know what the easy decision to make is? What we've always done. It's already accepted, unless, of course, what we've always done is an unmitigated disaster. It's a train wreck and everybody knows it, and we have to change. But now, because I've got three choices, your competitors, to change, I've got to sort out which one makes the most sense with the least amount of risk. I get the most benefit, the best result, the best outcome with the least amount of risk. Welcome back to Sales Untraining. As we wrap up a three-part series on becoming an effective listener, let's look at one more aspect of listening. I think it's absolutely critically important. When I was a young sales guy, I was a big Zig Ziglar guy. So Secrets of Closing the Sale was a book that I read multiple times. In fact, part of that book dramatically changed the trajectory of my own personal sales career. And I'm greatly indebted to Ziglar. I've always been a Ziglar fan, but he always used an illustration, and I'm trying to remember the exact phrase that he used, but there was a phrase that he used to illustrate something very, very important, and that is the way we emphasize certain words can dramatically change the meaning of a sentence. For example, and I think this is the phrase that he used, and some of you listeners out there, you might actually know what the actual phrase is, and you can give me an email or send me an email, let me know. But I believe it was this. Someone says to you, I can't say he stole the money. Now, I want you to think about that phrase and think about what it means. What does that phrase mean to you? I can't say he stole the money. Well, if you think about it long enough, and because I've asked numerous people over the years, to write down what they think it means, you get 4 or 5 different answers, and it's based on the perception of the person listening, which is a mistake, because this is a phrase that you can easily give 7 different meanings simply by emphasizing a different word in the sentence. I can't say he stole the money. 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 You see, 7 different interpretations of that one 7-word phrase. The last real critical cue to becoming an effective listener is something I'm sure you've heard many, many times, and it's very hard to practice because we're so focused on selling, don't you know? We're trying to tell all about the product and all that, and that is, you should never make assumptions. If you don't know for sure, you should be asking for clarification. That real listening includes hearing things that you're not sure what the exact interpretation of that phrase or paragraph or idea or thought is, to say, I'm not really sure that I'm understanding exactly what you're saying, or I think I hear you saying this. Is that correct? as I listen to you talk, I can't distinguish if you mean this or that. Instead, what we do automatically, intuitively, is we assign meaning immediately to whatever is said based on perception, based on assumption. And it is one of the hardest things to do, and it will lead you to really swing hard and miss converting a fantastic opportunity, because you find out later that something you perceived was completely wrong, and it never dawned on you to clarify. Clarifying what you think you know is critically important, which means as you listen, you think you know what's being said, but if there's any ambiguity, if you're making any kind of assumption, in the listening process, you've got to be able to say, this could mean a couple of things. Or maybe they mean this, maybe they mean that. Did they emphasize a specific word? Did they take on a certain facial expression or gesture at a certain point in time that would give me more understanding? My experience as a salesperson, as a young sales guy, as an experienced sales leader, and as a sales trainer / coach / whatever, is that we often completely miss very obvious things to other people who are simply observing. Why? As I pointed out in the last episode, because we're in our heads, we're focused on what's coming next, what we're going to say next, how we're going to rebut or defend a particular point, and it keeps us from being an effective listener. You have to get involved, engaged, in order to become an effective listener. You've got to ask the right opening question to get the dialogue started. You've got to pursue the answers that you get and ask for the details behind that first answer, because it is that excavation, if you will, that's going to provide more useful information. You can't make assumptions. You have to listen to what's being said, and in some cases, what's not being said. It's a whole process. And there are questions that we should be asking that we're not asking. And so we'll never have the opportunity to listen to those answers because they're not being asked. Well, I hope this has been helpful. And I hope this series on listening has challenged you and has caused you to think about some of the things you do that are going to make you a better salesperson. I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.